Hi, Father Alex here, host of the Godcast. The interview you're about to watch is with Reverend Michael Coren. Michael is an ordained minister in the Anglican Church. He was ordained into the Canadian Anglican Church, was formerly part of the Roman Catholic Church, but left that church some years ago. Michael is now an outspoken critique of Roman Catholicism and is a big supporter of LGBT matters in Canada, across Europe, and indeed throughout the world. Michael is a best-selling writer and also a former TV host in Canada. Michael originates from the UK, and so I do hope that you enjoy this forthcoming interview you're about to watch now with Reverend Michael Coren. I am delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is Reverend Michael Coren. Now, Michael is the author of numerous books. Many of them have been bestsellers. Michael also is a regular TV and radio presenter. And of course, he's ordained into the Anglican Church in Canada. So, Michael, it's a wonderful privilege to have you on the Godcast. How are you?
Not bad, thank you. It's my great pleasure. Pretty well. I mean, lockdown is... it's strange. For the longest time, it wasn't really getting to me, but just recently, it's become the new normal, and I don't like that at all. It's tough, but generally, I'm okay.
Okay, where in the world are you today?
Toronto. I'm a Brit. I'm from London, Essex border, but in 1986, I was invited over to Canada. I'd never been to North America before. I was invited over to University of Toronto to give a lecture at a literary conference. I was a journalist, and while I was there, at the end there's a big party, and this very beautiful young woman came up to me, possibly drunk, and she said, "You're amazing." And thinking this may never happen again, I married her, and it hasn't happened ever again, obviously. And 34 years of marriage, I don't think she's ever said it again either. But so I came to live in Canada, which I never thought I would do. I mean, I was very much a Brit. I still am, I think, and I do miss Britain a great deal. But I'm 62, so I've lived here most of my life now.
Was it a tough decision to leave the UK then?
It wasn't, but it was a childish decision because it should have been a tough decision. But I think I was rather glib about the whole thing, and I was seduced by, when I fall in love with this woman, way above my my grade, really. You know, I couldn't believe that she was interested in me, and things had happened quite early for me in the UK, and the dreams that I had, some of them have been fulfilled, and I was just, I don't know, I've always struggled with contentment, and this seemed an opportunity. But over the years, I haven't regretted it, because Canada's been very good to me. I'm very encouraging to someone from my class background. So I'm sort of upper working, lower middle class. And that was always, as you know, a strange thing in the UK. You could be very working class and the BBC will love you. Oh, isn't that charming? Or you can be part of an elite and then doors are opened even though they deny it. But there's that group in the middle. My dad was a cab driver from Hackney. I grew up in Ilford. And you're not complaining, but I don't know. Canada, I found all the doors are open. So I've appreciated that, but I think I was very unfair to my friends and to my family and my parents, and I left without thinking about them. And yeah, I've never really left the UK, I think, emotionally, psychologically.
What do you miss about the UK? Anything in particular?
Oh, I suppose the banality is really, and some of it's artificial, as nostalgia usually is. My dearest friends generally are still in Britain. Strange thing. I left there before I was 30, but my closest friends are those I made when I was at school or university. I miss satire. We don't really do satire that well in Canada. I miss the cut and thrust of discussion, which you do. I know you take it for granted in Britain, but all of North America, there can be, it can be very, very reductive, actually. And Canada is very different from the US. It's more like a Scandinavian. Actually, it's more like Scandinavia with French being spoken. I mean, it's a social democracy, thank God. It's not like the US, but there's certain things we do like. And I like, but I do miss the idea of, oh, golly, pubs and football talk and the wonderful sandwiches that you can live on that they just don't do in North America. There is no culture of wonderful sandwiches. So, but I think the historicity too. I mean, I'm an historian by training, and I love the past. And the past of we all have a past, but the past in Canada is relative. I mean, my house here is 1917. It's a fairly old house, but our history really is the history of the indigenous people, which is the history I don't particularly link to, respect enormously, but I don't feel it viscerally the way I do in Britain.
No. Those who are watching this will notice you in a dog collar, and those who are listening on the podcast will now know that you're wearing a dog collar, but your CV is quite extensive, Michael. What is your formal occupation, or is it quite varied?
Well, I suppose what they call me now is bivocational, okay. Which sounds more sexy and interesting than it really is. I'm a journalist, and when I left university, I remember when I left university back in 1980, a professor, a very dear man who's no longer with us, he took me by the arm and he said, "Now, Michael," he said, you're very clever and you're very lazy. So I can recommend two areas of life, either espionage or journalism." And I thought to myself, well, I'd make a bloody awful spy. So I became a journalist. Interesting though, because I think he must have been a recruiter, because two of the people, one person in my year became head of the intelligence services in Paris for MI6. And another fellow who was a year below me, he became head of MI6. So I think, I mean, I wouldn't have gone through the first, but anyway, I think that's what he was. And I drifted into journalism and in Britain, and then came here, and I hosted a TV show for about 16 years in all, radio show for many years, columnist all over the place. Quite well known in Southern Ontario. That'll probably be on my gravestone. He was fairly well known in Southern Ontario. It's a bit sad. And I wrote quite a few books. Some of them did okay, most of them didn't, but some did quite well. And then later on in life, I became a Roman Catholic when I was in my mid-20s. I wasn't raised with any religion, but about 7-8 years ago, I had, I suppose what you call a religious experience, which sounds a bit odd in that I've become a Catholic, but a very deep spiritual one. In the end, I had to leave the Catholic Church. I became an Anglican. And after a couple of years of a lot of urging, I should go to seminary, and I would laugh at the idea. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I did. And I was ordained, October the 20th, 2019. So, I mean, I still write. Yes. Mainly I do columns for some of the big papers here. Not much in the UK. I write for one or two. The Critic in the UK, I write for, occasionally some other people. And I have another book coming out in October. Okay. But most of what I do is as a cleric.
With the issue of leaving the Roman Catholic Church, just explain that to us, Michael, particularly for people who aren't familiar with you. I know many people will be, but your thinking and rationale behind leaving the Roman Catholic Church was what?
Sure. Well, it's a long story, and most people watching in the UK will have no idea. They'll know the name Coren because I've got a couple of famous cousins, but for me, they wouldn't have heard of me. I became a Catholic when I was 24. I was raised, my dad was Jewish, my mum not really. And we weren't raised with any religion, a sort of respect for faith, but it was a very, very secular home, very. But I became a Catholic under the influence of, I was writing a biography of G.K. Chesterton. So it was that generation, that Belloc and Chesterton and Ronald Knox and Evelyn Waugh and all those sort of people. It was a bit pretentious on my part, I think. But I became a Catholic, and a couple of years later, I came to Canada. And after a while, I sort of became linked to conservative Catholicism. And that's not to blame anyone else, because it was me. I mean, no one had a bayonet at me. And then on TV, and then a Random House, big publisher, asked me to write a book on the Catholic Church, which I did. And it was rather exponential. I had this reputation of being a conservative Catholic, defending the orthodox doctrines of the church. But I want to get this right, because it wasn't that I said, no, please, not me. I mean, I took it on voluntarily, and I became quite well known in North America. The book sold huge numbers, and I was speaking everywhere, and particularly on issues of Catholic doctrine that do have a position in the public square, which are generally equal marriage, assisted dying, abortion. I was putting forward, I hope, a fairly intelligent defense of Catholic teaching. I think it pushed me close to a breakdown in the end, because I was never lying, but there's part of me that must have been screaming out, "This isn't you." And about 7, 8 years ago, I just, especially on the gay issue, I was too close to too many gay people, gay men in particular, who were so dear to me. And they would sort of look at me and say, "Mike," I mean, I wasn't hateful. I mean, I wasn't homophobic, but I think I did more harm because I give a fairly intelligent argument against equal marriage, accept civil union, accept legal protection, but not marriage. Over here, most of the people who were arguing against equal marriage, frankly, were screaming, roaring fundamentalist types. No one took them seriously. I could go on with an English accent to put forward that this is why we, and so I did a lot of harm, I believe. And it got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore. And I knew if I was to continue to be a Christian, and there was nowhere else for me to go, I am a Christian, I had to move. And you can move in the Catholic Church, but it's a bit of a tightrope. Even I know clergy, wonderful men, gay, in relationships, beautiful Christian men, they have to lie. And they'll poke the bear a bit on the issue, but they know if they ever said, "Of course I believe that the loving commitment of two people of the same gender is loved and blessed by God and we should marry people," if they ever said that, they'd be out. I just couldn't do that. I thought, no, I've got to make a break. And so I found I could continue to be a Catholic in the Anglican Church, the Catholic I wanted to be. And I quietly left to become an Anglican, at which point my journalistic career collapsed within about a week, because a lot of what I was doing was connected to the Catholic Church, TV, radio columns all over North America. I wrote a book called Why Catholics Are Right, some of which I still stand by because I am still a Catholic, an Anglican Catholic. But that book sold about 45,000 copies. Believe me, I've never written a book that's done anything like that, or ever will again, I'm sure. But it was big, and I didn't think about it, but everything just collapsed. All my columns were cancelled, my radio show, everything was cancelled. I was doing mainstream work as well, but most of it had become within the Catholic Church and conservatism, and they all got rid of me. Some of it was understandable, some was rather cruel. And then a big campaign against me began. It was very nasty, actually, going after my family. But I'm glad it happened now, because if that happened to this white, straight, boring middle-aged man, imagine what it's like being a 16-year-old gay kid in a rural setting. Yes. So that gave me a wake-up call. But I mean, I get little bits of it now, but it was incredible, the abuse and people trolling my children's social media pages. Not that they could care, but anyway, that was a long time ago. And I just couldn't stay in the Roman Catholic Church, acknowledging there are wonderful Catholics. My wife is a Catholic, by the way. But I believe that if you actually are part of an institution that is authority-based, you have to stand by that. And it's living a lie to say, well, I do believe, but I disagree with the catechism on homosexuality. I disagree with it on abortion. I disagree with it on contraception. These are pretty big issues. And in the Anglican Church, I was given a room, especially in Canada, and a freedom to be the Catholic I wanted to be, the Christian I wanted to be, and I've loved it. And then it just moved on until seminary, which I really pushed away. But in the end, I thought, well, I've got to try it. So it's a long story.
Yeah, you talk about leaving and kind of the fallout of that there, but at the time, did you feel vindicated by your decision to leave, or was it a bit of a struggle for a while? And is it only now you're kind of more settled in the Anglican Church that you feel that you can be a real voice?
That's a very good question, because I never felt in any way that I'd done the wrong thing. And the more abuse I got, it's a bit like bombing, like the Blitz in 1940. It's not going to weaken people's resolve. Not that I'm comparing myself to, but every time somebody would, send something obscene to my door, or thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of emails and tweets and the rest of it, I didn't think, oh, this crazy person threatening me may have a point. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the love of Jesus is really to found in this fundamentalist hater. I didn't think that. I just thought, why didn't you do this earlier, Mike? That's the only thing I've ever thought to myself. Why did it take you so long? And no, I felt, but what I did feel is I really had to earn my spurs here, because initially there were people who said, well, that's interesting, but now this is almost 8 years ago now, so there aren't really people like that. There may be some left like that, but that's a long time ago, and they know what I've done and what I've experienced since then. I certainly feel the past few years I've been able to be the Christian voice I think I always wanted to be. And I don't know what was going on spiritually in any other way. I don't want to sound too spooky about all this, but I do have a voice in media in this country. And it has been such a joy in the past few years to write. You know, I write a regular column in the Toronto Star, which is the biggest selling paper over here. It's a big paper. And quite a few in the Globe and Mail, which is like the Star's like the Guardian, but with a bigger readership. It's a big one, a liberal paper. The Globe and Mail is more like the Times, a paper of record. And I write for both, especially the Star, and I write columns about faith issues, trying to appeal to a non-Christian world, but describe to them what it really means to be a follower of Jesus. And so you must use non-churchy language, and you must appeal to certain sensibilities that aren't always formed within religion. And the response is wonderful. I mean, it's unbelievable. People I hear from, a lot of them, well, I'm an atheist, but, and it's after the but, and it's lovely. And what they're really saying is, I so agree with you. And you never know what's being planted there. And others actually do want to come along to church. Now, I'm not going to say there are thousands of these people, but there are numerous. Mm. And that's wonderful to do that, because I you know, as you know, as a cleric, a lot of what you do, it's not arguing in defense of the creed. It's going out there, sitting by people who are in desperate times, just holding them and trying to help them. But yeah, I do love that combination of being a hands-on, or in the age of COVID, sort of hands-on, vicariously cleric, and also communicating the Christian message in mainstream media. Mm. I've got no enormous interest in writing for church media. No. God bless them. I do write for the Niagara Anglican, which is the diocese paper, but by and large, I want to be out there writing for people whose general view, particularly, it's not that different in the UK, but it's worse here. The general view of Christians over here is people who scream that COVID is not true, that the vaccine is just a way to track your movement, that abortion is murder. You know, that's the view most ordinary people in Canada have of Christians. They're not very nice people. I'm afraid that's the reality of the common view. So being able to change that is a blessing.
Yeah. That's one of the things why I've pursued with this Godcast, Mike, is because exactly those reasons that you've just described, is that potential to reach beyond the walls of the Christian church. Mike, I just want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. You said about fundamentalist haters. I was just wondering if some of these, as you described, fundamentalist haters ever corresponded to you in a kind of cry for love for you, as though they were doing it for you rather than, you know, I've had one or two phone calls towards myself because I support same-sex relationships. I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
That's a very good point, because it is there. Well, there are two types of the loving call, or the loving correspondence. There are those who say, you're going to burn in hell, and everyone you know is going to burn in hell, and out of love for you, I'd like you to reconsider, which I don't immediately interpret as being, let's go out for a beer together. But there are the others that actually do seem to have regret in them. Not many. I would say, I can't put an exact percentage, but very, very few were people that, now there were people who wrote and said, I disagree with you so much, and I really wish you hadn't done this, but I love you, and I just hope you find peace and whatever. There were some like that. I can think of a Catholic priest in England, I'm not going to name him, who wrote to me like that. It's a beautiful thing. But those who said, you're wrong on this, and it's out of love and concern for you, I really like to I got a few of those, but really not very many, not very many. And to those I would respond. But I'm trying to think back now. It was very unusual to receive that sort of thing. I mean, probably a lot of those people simply, out of decency, didn't write to me. But for those people, the number of people who wrote to say, I think you've got all this wrong, and I'm genuinely worried about you. And no, not very many like that.
I have interviewed recently the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell.
I know, he's a great man. He's a Tottenham supporter from Essex. I've only met him once in London about a year, just before he was made Archbishop. But I think it's a great day when an Essex boy who supports Tottenham can be the Archbishop of York. That is a wonderful, wonderful achievement.
The Spurs. But I was going to ask about living in love and faith. I'm sure you've heard about this over in Canada. And I just wondering what your take on this was. I mean, this idea that we are going to have a conversation to be able to understand differences better and well, in the potential that might affect our thinking. I'm a little bit cynical. I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I'm a little bit cynical too. I think it comes from a place of goodwill and love. And I do know evangelicals in the church who will say, I mean, one of them said to me, she said, I wish I could understand scripture in a way that allowed me to embrace my gay friends and endorse marriage between them. I wish, I can't do it. And she was really speaking from pain. And you could tell that this was a loving woman. I tried to convince, I don't think I succeeded. And I know there are good people who want dialogue, and I can't speak for the gay community, obviously, but it does reach a point when people say, we've had enough. You know, my dad was Jewish, working class Jewish man from Hackney, Tottenham. And there was a long period in church history when it was loving Jews so much you wanted them to stop being Jews. Well, that's not love. And eventually the church realized this is not the way. You love people for who they are. And being Jewish and being gay, I understand the context and so on, but is there such a difference? People are born with a sexuality. It's not a moral issue. It's not a decision. And morality is defined by how we treat other people, not by who we love. I was born straight. I have dear friends who are born gay. But we're still trying to work out how to accommodate those people, how to deal with those people. And scripture, my golly, I wrote a book about this. I spent a long time on this issue. You know it as well as I do. The scriptural argument against equal marriage and full inclusion of gay people in the church is wafer thin. And all of those arguments can be contradicted. So in Canada, we've made a lot more progress. In the UK, I understand, I mean, there is a large evangelical wing that has to be listened to. There's the church in the Caribbean and Africa and Sydney, Australia, and so on that has a different view. But I don't know. Like you, I'm a little cynical. I mean, the words are all very well, but it comes a time when we simply have to say, I mean, I long for the day, and I think it'll happen, probably after I'm gone. It'll take a few years yet, when the Anglican communion will look back on issues of sexuality and say, really? We really had an issue there? I look at, we have 4 children, and you look at the next generation of kids, and it's almost post-gay. Why is that an issue? I don't get it. Why is that an issue? Yeah. Roman Catholic Church is totally different. Their views on what they call natural law and the almost an obsession with procreation and lots of other things. It's different. But for us, I think we worked out a very sophisticated theology where we really should be able to accommodate. You know, contraception, if you look at what was said about contraception up until 1930 in Anglican circles, the idea that this was the end of Christendom if contraception was accepted. Well, it wasn't the end of Christendom. And but I mean, I know it's difficult for bishops. I know it. I know a number of clergy in England who are either sympathetic or themselves gay, and I know what they've gone through. What I do object to very much, though, is a hypocrisy where if you keep quiet about your sexuality, you will be promoted, but if you're honest about it, you won't be. That sort of thing. And Richard Coles has been a big influence on my life. I think he's a wonderful man. And Richard's latest book about the death of David, his partner, is beautiful at the end, where he talks about they weren't allowed to walk up the aisle together. But when David's in a casket, they can walk up the aisle together. It's heartbreaking.
It's very, very moving, isn't it? It's yeah, there's a pause for thought there, actually. I have a number of gay friends in the church, and I'm not sure they've even got to a place of kind of having their relationships blessed in church. I think they just would like to be felt loved and accepted. I think that's the first point we need to get to, and I'm not sure if that will happen in my lifetime. What do you think, Michael?
I think it's generational, as I mentioned earlier. It depends on the age of the congregation. Although I started in November at a church in Burlington, Ontario, and it's, as with most congregations, it's older. There are young people there, but a lot of older people. And I'm amazed how progressive they are. They really are. And I don't know. I even think back about my mum and dad, who were working class people of no religion. They weren't homophobic. I mean, they would speak. They'd speak quietly about the issue, as they would about people who are living. I think they're living together, but they're very nice. But they didn't have any hatred, good Lord, no, not even any disapproval. It was just, I suppose, social manners. And I think a lot of congregations really do. I think they accept more than we think. I think that's what happened during the debate on same-sex marriage. I think a lot of conservatives were surprised at how accepting people were. They thought, well, the people will be with us, even people on the right, because there's a new conservatism. You see it even in the Conservative Party in Britain, which is influenced by the libertarian. I mean, David Cameron, for all that he was, when it came to equal marriage, I think he was genuine. He really believed it. So this is a great tragedy. The opposition to equal marriage is almost exclusively now coming from Christians. The secular right doesn't really have that much interest in it, almost sees it as a digression. But congregations, it depends on all sorts of things, their background, their age, their theology. There are certain evangelical churches quite clearly that will have a different view. But I don't know, those gay friends who are clergy over in this country have always told me that they've been surprised, but rather disarmed by how warmly they are received.
Michael, maybe you can share some of your wisdom with me, because I struggled from entering the debate because it really gets to me and it irritates me and it upsets me about people who would say that homosexuality is nothing more than a lifestyle and it's just a clear act of sin, and conversion is required. So I find that quite offensive, to actually getting stuck into the debate and almost feel like you're trying to act on behalf of those who you support. I really struggle with it. Is there much mileage to be gained in arguing? Because I kind of feel that I'm not going to change their opinion, and they're certainly not going to change mine. So I can actually love them better.
Yeah,
by saying nothing.
That's very wise, and yes. I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, I have chosen to enter the debate because I suppose I've got a certain public influence limited here, and then I said to myself, well, yeah, but you're not part of this argument, but that gave me more influence because people could say, well, Michael Coren, he's boringly straight and he has this view and that view. So I did get involved with it. As you said, there are minds who simply cannot change. On Twitter, I've got quite a following on Twitter, and I will send articles that I've written trying to encapsulate the argument, like just a 1,000-word column, and I'll politely say, please have a read of this, and they'll tweet back within 30 seconds. They obviously haven't even opened the thing, just to say Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, or something like that. And you realize, well, I really am wasting my time here. But there are other people where they do. I think you can plant some seeds of it, just because people don't. When you say to them, you realize Jesus never mentions the issue. You realize that when Jesus deals with a centurion, although I'm not saying it's absolute, there's a very good argument to say he was dealing with a man in a same-sex relationship, and that's what people around him would have assumed. You do realize lesbianism is never mentioned in the Old Testament. You understand that the sin of Sodom is referred to within Scripture as not being about homosexuality. You look at David and Jonathan. What is Paul really saying? This is what the Greek actually says, and what he's referring to. And there are people, oh, I don't know, because when they've been fed certain verses out of context. So do you change people? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But your approach, I think, is equally valid and can be more effective, because, as you know so well, a lot of what we do isn't about arguing this issue. It's about trying to find people a place to live and somewhere they can get food security and just feel a bit of dignity. And
yeah,
we're privileged that we can sit by people in the last moments of their life, and not arguing about a certain point of doctrine. We're just saying we're here.
Yeah, it is very much an internal squabble, isn't it? I mean, while we squabble about these matters, the world goes on, and I'm attached to urban areas where we are in Burnley, and they're really not interested. They don't care what we think, really, and that's sad as well, I think, in its own way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as I mentioned earlier on, so much of the perception of Christianity has been arguing about this issue. And during the pandemic, the churches have acted very responsibly. And in fact, my diocese has been stricter than the provincial government in terms of the lockdown, which has been difficult in some ways, but there we are. But there are those churches, not many, not in the Anglican communion, outside of mainstream Christianity, who have insisted on opening. There's one minister who went to prison, quite rightly so. I mean, he just simply kept refusing to obey the law. The police didn't want to do it. This is Canada. This is not a dictatorship. But, please don't. In the end, you have to. And they are fanatics. And so I've written a piece for our news magazine in Canada called Macleans. It's like Time on Newsweek that comes out this week, where I've simply written about what I do which is, as with you, you're on the phone to people who are terribly isolated, and you deal with people who've lost 2 parents in the space of a week through to COVID. You put people in touch with social services. And I know people are going to say, really, that's what they do? I thought they just screamed about vaccines being the work of Satan. And just being there, most of what we do is it's like the glorious banality of being a cleric, and it's an absolute. I mean, it breaks you. You're in tears. Some of as you know, some of the grief out there is it's tangible. But that reality is important to depict, and it is who we are. And I've only been ordained a year and a half or so. Has anyone one-to-one ever asked me about church teaching on sexuality? No. I've written about it. I've spoken about it. When I actually deal with people, no, they don't ask me about that. It's just not an issue for them.
No. Thank you, Michael. And what's the situation in Canada with COVID, Michael? Is the nation getting on top of things? Where is the vaccine program coming on? Is it being rolled out well?
No, very badly, which is surprising because this is a very easy country to govern. It's a very comfortable nation of what are we now, 38 million people, I suppose. Huge country, and social democratic. We have a wonderful health service, under strain as the NHS is, but it's still a wonderful service. It's not like the US. We have quite fair taxation. The open wound in Canadian society is our treatment of Indigenous people, Native people. That's the thing that is really the birth defect of this country. But otherwise, we have problems. We run fairly smoothly. But this shocked people because at a federal and provincial level, it wasn't done well. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, I don't think they closed borders quickly enough. We had closed down under previous governments our own research facilities for producing vaccines. We have some of the leading doctors and hospitals in the world here, but we couldn't produce quickly enough. We were very slow. Provincially in Ontario, which is the most populous province, we have a premier who is out of his depth. He's the brother of the man who was quite well known internationally, the mayor of Toronto, who had a crack habit. Do you remember Rob Ford? That was his brother is a premier, and he's just not up to it. And we're starting. I mean, my wife and I had our first vaccine 6 weeks ago. Our second one, we hope, in July. None of our kids have it. Most of the people I know haven't had it, even the first one. So numbers have been terrible. Intensive care units are strained. No, it's been very, very bad. Even the US, and we sit up here and we look at the US and, oh dear, look at those Americans. And sometimes that's justified, but even they, certainly as soon as Biden got in, they've been way better at it than we have. So it hasn't gone well, but I mean, where we are a country that cares, we are as I said, a social democracy. So people are looked after, but no, it hasn't been at all adequate. There were some things that were very good. Communities in the North, Indigenous communities received the vaccine fairly early, that sort of thing. And also what it's highlighted is wealthy and poor areas. You look at the map of Toronto, you can see areas of wealth and the vaccination rates will be 45%, and you'll go to racialized areas with poverty issues and it'll be 12%. Well, where have you heard that story before? But so, no, we failed actually. We failed on this one.
Yeah. Michael, it's been really lovely talking to you. Just you've got this book, you say you're writing a new book. Can you give anything away?
It's all done, thank the Lord, because I don't enjoy writing them. But a local publisher, it used to be with Random House, they were biggie, but a good-sized local publisher, Canadian publisher, approached me and said, would you write a sort of an introduction to progressive Christianity? Not very long, music to my ears, not very long. And so we titled it The Rebel Christ. And it's only about, I don't know, 50,000 words or so. And it's really just addressing issues, hot button issues like homosexuality, abortion, economic justice, assisted dying, racism, fairly briefly, some longer than others, and giving scriptural responses to and what the church really believes. And on the abortion issue, for example, which is so big here, and even more so in the US, you can believe anything you like, but if you're not solidly pro-life, then you're going to hell. Just to outline what actually, you know what, scripture, at one point in the Old Testament, abortion is recommended, and the view of early Judaism was certainly not life begins at conception. And of course, it's nuanced, because if you have socialized daycare and socialized medicine and equality for women and increased minimum wage and sex ed in schools and free contraceptives, abortion rates will drop, well, they'll plummet. But most of the people who are anti-abortion are very conservative. So they don't want any of that anyway. And they're not pro-life. They're not interested in the child after birth. They're not even interested in the child after conception, because they don't want socialized medicine so a poor woman in an inner city who's pregnant can get regular checkups. They don't want that. So it's really talking about those issues and what scripture says about economic, because I think Hebrew scriptures and New Testament are very socialistic. So let's put it this way. I can't see it being Conservative Book Club Book of the Year. But I've got, and even worse, I've got a lovely quote from Stephen Fry from the front, which will drive them crazy because Stephen's an atheist. One of the most, I don't think you'll mind me saying this, one of the most Christian people I've ever met in terms of his kindness and generosity and love. But so we've got that, that'll beguile people. And I'm not a scholar, I'm not a theologian, I'm just a journalist, but I'm trying to put in journalistic terms, not to shock people, but I hope they will be shocked by realizing that what they've heard Christians say for so long on certain issues isn't really backed up by Christianity.
Yeah. Michael, I think my overriding feeling from this interview is that you are a shining example to all of us in the church who've got these wrestling debates going on, because you've demonstrated by your actions that you're not adverse to changing your view, and you're not a closed book on really important matters. So I do want to thank you for that, because it's a real encouragement to somebody like myself to, to think for myself, not to follow what everybody expects you to follow, to be prepared to challenge when necessary. So I want to thank you for that, Michael. Just have a couple of last questions. And I know you haven't been to the UK for a long time, but I'm in Burnley in Lancashire. I was just wondering if you'd ever been to Lancashire on your travels?
Sure. I mean, I come back every year, but I haven't been back since November 2019 because of COVID. But oh yeah, I have Preston I know fairly well. And many years ago, I was researcher for Colin Welland. Do you remember Colin?
Yes, I do.
He passed away, unfortunately. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but I was very fond of him. And he was from Newton-le-Willows near Lee. So I know that area, and I know Manchester well, because my younger son, God forgive him, deserted me for Man United. So I used to take him to Man United games. And I would, I grew up as an avid Spurs fan, so I'd go to Tottenham away games. Never been to Burnley, though, oddly enough. I don't think, no. I mean, I've been to a lot of places in Lancashire and a lot in Yorkshire too, but I've never been to Burnley.
Well, you must add that to your bucket list, Michael.
I really must. I must come up and because now they'll stay up this year. It looks like I'll come up to an away game at Turf Moor, and you can take me there.
I will. I'll get you a nice. Well, that would be lovely, Michael. It's been lovely catching up with you. Thank you so much for your time, and we do hope things improve quickly for people in Canada regarding COVID, and that vaccine gets a wiggle on, as we say around here, and you get on top of things quickly. So thanks so much for your time, and we send our love to you from Burnley in the UK. God bless.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.